all you Feminerds out there. I'm Beckah.
And I'm Leigh.
And we are here today to talk about one of our favorite comics, Lumberjanes. First of all, we wanted to apologize for the slight tardiness. Things have been a little bonkers for both of us this month, and we are back. We don't have an interview lined up for you this month, but like I said, we're going to be talking about Lumberjanes which is an awesome thing, and we're super excited about it. Lumberjanes was created by Noel Stevenson, who also wrote Nimona. The first few volumes that we're going to talk about were written by Noel Stevenson and Grace Ellis, and the first two volumes were illustrated by Brooke Allen. Now, Lumberjanes is a comic that follows the adventures of Ripley, Molly, Mal, Joe, and April, and sometimes their counselor, Jen, in their supernatural camping adventures, which are super duper fun. We're going to talk about the first 3 volumes today.
So what drew me to this comic was the 3 main elements on an all-female summer camp with supernatural mysteries. They're all my favorite things. What's not to like? The tagline says it all. Camp for hardcore lady types and friendship to the max. It has a similar feel to Gravity Falls, which is also one of my favorites. And I also went to summer camp as a kid, and my first job was a camp counselor. My campmates and I were always telling ghost stories and searching the woods for clues, so this book definitely spoke to me. Volume 1 is their first adventures that include so many mysterious things, like getting attacked by a pack of 3-eyed foxes, an old woman who can turn into a bear, mystical objects with powers, river monsters, secret caverns with magical statues and obstacles to overcome, a holy kitten, yetis, and a possessed boys camp. It's like Tomb Raider or Indiana Jones goes to camp.
Which is absolutely nothing like any of the camp experiences I had, unfortunately. Right? The only camp I ever went to was like a church camp over the summer for youth, and it was fun, but we focused a lot on like spirituality and growing closer to God, which right now I don't do that anymore, but so I just didn't have the same kind of camp experience. Obviously, supernatural stuff aside, but I didn't really have the same kind of experience with a group of people that I felt so close with and that I had so much fun with.
I also went to a Christian camp, and we also focused a lot on spirituality. I think that was one of the reasons why I really enjoyed it, because that's important to me. But I feel like in our downtime as kids, you just naturally want to come up with adventures and be more creative and think outside of the box. So we would often go out into the woods and, just kind of do our own imaginary things. There were some actual ghost tales of situations that had happened at the camp that had been passed on to us. There was also a camp bear named Eunice that had to get sighted every year. So it was always like, where's Eunice, and is Eunice around? And so, at night, I feel like there was always times where we were freaking out because, these things exist and we know they exist.
Who the hell decided to name the bear Eunice?
I don't know, but Eunice, it was every year Eunice, who sighted Eunice, and then we'd have walkie-talkies and everything, and we'd be like, Eunice is on the back porch, and that's happened before.
In general, I feel like Lumberjanes is really fun. It's very creative and imaginative, and it's very exciting, but it's not relentless. I feel like there's just enough mystery and excitement to hook us in and give us little clues that we'll piece together through each adventure. But it also allows for a lot of character development, and I think we can both agree that these characters in these books are some of the best that I've ever read and the most fun to get to know.
I love that this comic has an all-female cast. That's so rare in comics these days, and was one of the first comics that I would list as a recommendation for the Feminerd files. A group of us even cosplayed as the Lumberjanes when we went to Comic-Con a couple summers ago. The main characters are a group of 5 cabin mates: Ripley, April, Joe, Molly, and Mal. They all have very different personalities that sometimes conflict with each other, but they always find a way to work together when they need to.
I also love that their individuality allows them to work together and have to rely on each other's strengths. But what I also love is that they aren't ever trying to outdo each other. April is super, super competitive, but not necessarily with her really close group of friends. They are always supportive of each other. And when one person does something that the others can't, they almost always offer their thanks and gratitude, which is really refreshing to see. What I also love about each character is that she has flaws, fears or quirks or shortcomings, but it's not like superhero comics where they're these tragic, tortured souls. They are just human, and that's really cool to kind of see how those personality traits come out and how they work through them or overcome them throughout the comics.
My favorite character is Mal. She's queer and has a cool and confident look and demeanor to her, but she also seems to have a lot of anxiety, and she's the first to tell the others when something seems like a bad idea and is too dangerous. I cosplayed as her for Comic-Con. Other characters include Jen, the camp counselor, who thinks everything is strange and dangerous at this camp and that her campers are extremely reckless. There's also the camp director, Rosie. She's a tough lady who knows more about the supernatural mysteries of the woods than she lets on.
Yeah, this comic is filled with so many great personalities and so many great individuals. I love that they all are so unique, from their hair color to their body type to their personality. One of my favorite characters is Ripley, and I cosplayed her for our little Comic-Con jaunt, which was a lot of fun. I really like her because she's super spontaneous and she just loves glitter and kittens and shiny things, and she always just kind of does the first thing that pops into her head. And I'm not like that. I try to take a little bit more time to think about things, so I'm a little bit more calculating. But when I play video games, and I'm really drawn to characters that are just totally reckless because I don't have to suffer the consequences that they do. I just get to enjoy their antics. But what I also love about Ripley is how much heart and how much love she has. She loves Jen, the camp counselor, so much. And poor Jen has to put up with all of these things that are happening. But Ripley always just wants to hug her and says she loves her and just wants to show how much affection that she has for this group of people.
So throughout the different volumes, we get to see them grow as different people and as a group. So in volume 2, the adventures continue. There's a Greek goddess, there's raptors, and a bear woman. Oh my. So in this volume, they meet Diane, who is a not-so-friendly camper with mystical abilities that they later find out is a Greek goddess. Molly's hat is actually a live raccoon named Bubbles, and Mal and Molly start to like each other. Which then leads into volume 3, which is my favorite volume of all of them. It focuses a lot on Mal and Molly's relationship as it develops. They follow the bear woman into a different dimension for another dangerous adventure, and we get to see Molly and Mal at their best and at their worst and how they support each other through it. It's so sweet, and it's one of the reasons that made me appreciate this comic and the character of Mal so very much.
We did notice that there was a little bit of a disjointed nature between volumes 1 and volume 2. It feels like the events leading up to the very end of volume 1 weren't really picked up in the same way in volume 2, that those events didn't really come together until the end of volume 2 and going into volume 3. And that kind of feels like a little bit of how the comic is set up, that there's all of these seemingly random events that are happening that you don't really understand how they come together until a little bit later, but it did make the transition between volume 1 and volume 2 a little bit wonky.
I think one of the reasons why the comic book seems a little bit more like random stories and it's a little disjointed from story to story is because of the way that the comic is set up, which actually is really a creative layout. It's set up to look like the Lumberjanes handbook. So the prologue is an introduction to the camp and what it means to be a Lumberjane. And my favorite part is the Lumberjanes pledge. I solemnly swear to do my best every day and in all that I do, to the brave and strong, to be truthful and compassionate, to be interesting and interested, to pay attention and question the world around me, to think of others first, to always help and protect my friends. Then there's a line about God or whatever. And to make the world a better place for Lumberjane Scouts and for everyone else. That was fun. Each chapter starts with a page from the handbook about each badge the Lumberjane Scouts can earn, including my favorite badge that I purchased at their booth at Comic-Con, which is called the Up All Night badge. I also would have earned that badge the first night, too. And at the end of each chapter, it's like a camp scrapbook where they have Polaroids taped up that recap what happened in each chapter and all of the badges that they've earned.
I also felt that the comic was very well structured. The pacing is really good. There's a good variety of panel types to keep the artwork interesting and the story flowing. I didn't feel like it was too cluttered or too messy, but it didn't have the rigidity and the classic structure of something like Bandette, which worked really well for that comic. But these are a little bit more chaotic. They're a little bit more crazy. Lots of things are happening. There's more characters to follow. And so having a little bit looser structure really worked in their favor. I felt like the backgrounds were detailed enough when they needed to be, but it didn't distract from the action. But everything really helped to build the vibrancy of this world. The artwork is so fun. It's a little rough around the edges, but each character is really well designed and unique, so you can easily tell them apart, unlike some of the like cookie cutter Disney princess faces. Everybody has a very distinct look, and this world has a very distinct feel.
I completely agree. I really like the artwork in this comic. It really feels like camp to me. The colors, the textures, the details, etc. There's a lot of wood grain and a lot of plaid, and those are my personal favorite anyway. And so I thoroughly enjoy the feel of this comic.
Yeah, I think with a harder, more realistic style, it wouldn't really feel as fun or imaginative. It would feel darker and more serious. I think because the artwork is lighter and a little bit looser, we never really feel like the Lumberjanes are in any real danger. They're scrappy and they can get through anything, and that kind of leads to the fun that this comic embodies. I did want to close out by saying that I really love this comic and I love to recommend it for people. I think that if I had something like this when I was younger, I would be in a very different place than I am right now, or how long it took me to get to where I am now in regards to my body positivity and my sexuality. I think there's a lot going on in these comics, and I think a lot of women or girls or people who identify with these characters have a lot that they can relate to and feel like they're reflected in these comics. You know, I have a group of friends that I didn't meet until college that now I feel like if we were in a Lumberjanes type situation, we would kind of have a similar group dynamic. But I didn't have that when I was younger. I grew up in a few different places. I moved around a lot, and so didn't have a close group of friends that I spent a lot of time with and got to know really, really well. And so seeing this group of people reflected in this comic, I want them to be real people so I can be friends with them. But that's what's so great about literature and about comics, and that's why we like to talk about these things, is because sometimes we can't find these things in real life, and so we can find them in these comics, and we can find these characters that we can relate to that make us feel better about ourselves. And that's why I love doing this.
I love doing this too. This is actually one of my very favorite things to do with our podcast, and I really enjoy getting to work with Beckah, so this is fun. Anyway, so this has been File 741. I'm Leigh.
And I'm Beckah.
Thank you for listening, and please like us on Facebook or follow us on Instagram and Twitter. You can tune in to all of our podcasts on iTunes, Podbean, YouTube, or at thefeminerdfiles.net.